Yes. Hi, my name is Michael Jesuek. I am a board member and board secretary for Rehumanize International. Thank you all for coming out and for committing yourselves to considering, I think, some really inspiring and thought-provoking speakers so far. I hope Pedro will be the same here. Pedro De Velasco is a husband and a father of 3 girls. He is an advocate for migrants' rights and a migrant himself, with over 14 years of experience working with migrant communities on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border. Pedro holds a law degree from the Universidad Autónoma de Coahuila, and a certificate in U.S. criminal and immigration law from the University of Arizona. He currently serves as the Director of Education and Advocacy with the Kino Border Initiative, a Catholic binational organization in Ambos Nogales, whose mission is to promote humane, just, and workable migration. Prior to coming to the U.S., Pedro was the state coordinator of the Paisano Program in Coahuila, Mexico, a joint effort responsible for supporting and informing Mexicans and Mexican Americans about their rights and obligations upon returning to or visiting Mexico. He arrived in Arizona in 2013 to work at the Consulate of Mexico in Tucson, where he was consul of protection and legal affairs. His role was to protect and ensure the rights and well-being of Mexican nationals abroad, which allowed him to know firsthand their needs and challenges. He then became a community organizer with Chicanos por la Causa, promoting immigrant integration and integral community development in southern Arizona. Pedro's work in benefit of our community, regardless of national origin or background, led him to join the Kino Border Initiative in 2021, where he is responsible for building and strengthening collaborative networks that help reverse the anti-immigrant rhetoric and influence the transformation of immigration policies towards a humane and just system. With that, I will let Pedro take over, and I might step back in for the question and answer session.
Thank you so much for that introduction. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. That way you're going to be able to see the presentation that I have here. So great. I'm hoping that you're able to see it now. And well, so enough with introductions, but basically the Kino Border Initiative, we are a binational Catholic organization locally rooted in what is called Ambos Nogales, because it's Nogales on both sides of the border, the same community, divided by the border, but together by its people. So it's really ties that, you know, are binational, and we consider ourselves that way, a binational organization. And as we were saying, we work to promote humane, just, and workable migration. And we do this through direct humanitarian assistance and holistic accompaniment of migrants, education and encounter to awaken solidarity with migrants, and also policy advocacy, both in Mexico and the United States. So our organization, we actually just celebrated our quinceañera, our 15 years of service in Ambos Nogales. It all started, 15 years ago. Sister Engracia, a missioner of the Eucharist, a religious order on the Mexican side, she started noticing that Mexican nationals were deported to the Mexican side with pretty much no further guidance, just assuming like, okay, since you're back to your country, you pretty much should know how to handle yourself. But that was not the reality, because for a lot of people, I mean, they had been living in the United States for several years, or even Nogales was not their hometown. So they were left without any resources, without any guidance, counsel, or, you know, food whatsoever. So she started to encounter them by, you know, parking her car below a bridge right out of the port of entry. She would open her trunk and serve, you know, beans, rice, whatever meat she had available. And that's how it started. And now it has grown into what you're seeing in the other picture. We have an outreach center, and, you know, food is only one of the many services that we continue to provide. And it, of course, also the profile of the migrants that we are serving has changed a little bit over the years. So who do we serve? Well, we serve pretty much any person that's in the context of on the move. It could be migrants, refugee, recently expelled people. But as you are seeing, these are our statistics for this year, January to October of 2023. So the vast majority of the people that we are serving are actually Mexican nationals that are trying to get to the United States, hoping to seek asylum. So 76% are Mexican nationals. Then the largest group are Venezuelan, Honduran, Nicaraguan, and pretty much Central America, and also the other nationalities such as Cuba, Haiti, and some of South America, like Colombia. But these are the nationalities that you're seeing here are the largest groups. And talking about the way that they arrive, you can see that, I mean, back when we started 15 years ago, the vast majority were people recently deported, either just crossing or that had been living in the United States for several years. Now you can see that the vast majority of the people that we are serving are arriving from the South. This includes, of course, Mexican nationals, but also Central American, South American that are traveling south to north. And this is the other thing that has changed a lot. A few years ago, you will see that economic reasons was by far the biggest reason for people migrating, right? And this is from 2016. And last year, over the course of the year, most of the people that we were serving, 75%, indicated some form of violence as the reason why they had to leave. So it was not a decision of migrating in hopes of a better future. Well, it was and it wasn't, but it was mostly that they were forced out of their hometowns or their home countries because of some form of violence. So these are the people that we are receiving. And back to the other one, as you can see right now, the vast majority of the people that we are serving are actually minors. Most of them not accompanied, but within families. But you can see that it's not longer as when we started, male adult individuals being recently expelled, but now our families that are arriving to the border. So as I explained, we still continue to serve food to migrants every day, not only the ones that are staying with us at the shelter, but pretty much any person that is in Nogales, staying at any other shelter, or that just arrived, or that has been living for the last few months because they haven't been able to secure an appointment to cross the United States. We provide food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the folks that are staying with us. We also provide medical attention, and that is a part of the needs of the services that we are providing. We have thankfully a doctor in our staff, but we also have volunteers, nurse practitioners that come from the US side of the border to our center on the Mexican side of the border. We also offer clothes, not only for people that are recently expelled with only what they have on, but also a lot of families, a lot of people that are fleeing violence and persecution, they only left with whatever clothes they have on. So, having this roperia available to them, it's a very important effort. And particularly now that the temperatures are beginning to drop, of course, coats, sweatshirts, and, blankets, all of that is pretty much needed. And we take those as donations as well. And yes, shelter, but we don't define ourselves as a shelter. I always explain that, shelter is one of the many services that we offer to the folks that are coming to us in Nogales. And as I was explaining, we engage in advocacy. So basically, to explain this in a more understandable way, whoever's coming to Kino for the first time usually gets an intake survey where we explain very thoroughly that we are a Catholic organization, that we are here to provide all these services, that we are a nonprofit organization, we are a non-governmental organization, we're in no way related either to the US or the Mexican government or any other government whatsoever. So we explain that this also means that we don't have any say in on who gets asylum and who doesn't. We explain, the different services that we have available for them. And we also explain that, we are a binational organization, which means that, yes, we are present on the Mexican side of the border, where we are providing all these services that are available to them, but that we're also present in the US, and that in the US, and I mean also in Mexico, but we engage in this policy advocacy. And we explain it that we're pushing for humane, just laws and policies regarding migration, so that we can, make things better for them and for the next to come, but that we do this through the testimonies that they willingly share with us. But we highlight that, it's theirs and theirs only. So whatever they want to share with us, they're welcome to do so. But our services are in no way conditioned to them sharing these testimonies. But we explain, like, this way we're hoping to push here or there for changes. And that's what we do with the testimony. And also, the testimony helps us to flag, for our psychosocial service, like if there's a need for emotional support, or if there's a need for a social worker or for medical attention. So that's why it is very important when we're saying that, we're not only a direct humanitarian service provider, but we are about holistic accompaniment. And that's why it is very important to understand that we want to meet the needs of the person as a whole, but we want to make sure that, we are accompanying them, we are empowering them, we are providing information so that they are able to make informed decisions for themselves. We want to be able to have them feel empowered. We want, to build political agency so that they're able to advocate for their own cases. So that being said, we also do education. But when we talk about education, I like to explain that it's not like we are teaching anything to anybody. It's more about, we are facilitating these encounters between migrants and the rest of the community, because we have proven experience that through this encounter, we will help awaken solidarity. And understanding solidarity not as this vague feeling of compassion towards the other, but really the commitment to fight shoulder by shoulder for common good. So we receive groups from all across the United States. They come here for immersion experience. They learn about what's going on, what's really the impact of these policies in the United States. And we hope that this is also like a indirect advocacy, that once they go back to their communities, they advocate for humane and just laws and policies in migration. And we also have partnered with other organizations such as Save the Children. Save the Children is an international organization that accompanies children. And this is something to think on, because children are part of this context of migration, of this trauma of migration. So, I always think of even things that could seem easy for us, that could seem normal to us, but they are not for these children that are traveling. Like, for example, most of these kids, they haven't been in school for a while, or, they haven't even been able to play, draw, play with other kids. Simply being kids. I always remember this little girl called Diana. She was at our center a couple of years ago, and she was the most playful girl, joyful girl. When I was in the middle of working, she would stop by and say, like, "Hey, stop working. Why don't you play with me? Why don't you carry me like a horse? Why don't you do this and that?" And she was really much like this positive energy all over the place. So one time I noticed her mom. It was easy to spot because she looked exactly the same. Well, I guess Diana looked exactly the same as her mother. And I approached to her and say, like, "Are you Diana's mom?" And she was like, "Yeah, what did she do?" I was like, "No, no, no, nothing. It's not a complaint. It's on the contrary, like a compliment, like how joyful, how happy little girl she is. And I just wanted to let you know that." And, with watery eyes, she came back to me and said, like, "Thank you." thank you, because I really needed to hear that, because for the last few months that we were on the move, and with all that she had to endure and experience, I mean, it's just too much for a little girl. So just being able to see her happy, playing with other kids, playing with you, feeling safe, being a little girl, that means a lot. That means the world to me. So I always think of little Diana, this 6-year-old girl, and I take it as an experience. So that's part of what Save the Children does in collaboration with our psychosocial team. We also have partnered with the Florence Immigrant and Refugee Rights Project. This is, you probably have heard of them. This is a great organization, a legal service provider in the United States. They work with people that are seeking asylum, mainly folks in detention. But since 2017, they have come to the southern border to work with people that are about to cross, to make sure that they understand what is asylum, what is not, risks of detention, and again, information so they are able to make informed decisions for themselves, but also empower them to advocate for their own cases. So we've been talking about asylum. We've been touching on it for a little bit. So I just want to make sure that we are on the same page here. So when we talk about asylum, we're talking about a person who is fleeing violence and persecution. So these 5 are the requirements for an asylum case under the US law. So yes, violence and persecution, and it has to be suffered directly by that person or an immediate family member. It's not enough to say like, well, the political crisis or the violence that has spread in Mexico, I don't feel safe, or, no, it has to be directly suffered by you. So violence and persecution directly suffered by you because of your, and let's use the other hand, your race or ethnicity, your nationality, your religion, your political opinion, or your membership to a particular social group. Okay? So violence and persecution suffered directly by you because of one of these 5 reasons, and that either government is actively pursuing you or has violent you, or any government's direct involvement, or it's omission. You reported to the police, you filed a police report, and they did nothing about it. So, and 5, that relocation within the same country is not possible. So those are the requirements for an asylum seeker. So this person that is fleeing violence and persecution suffered directly because of the race, nationality, religion, political opinion, membership to a certain group, that the government is involved in some way, and that relocation is not possible. Therefore, they are seeking the protection of another country, in this case, the United States. Basically, after World War II, the entire international community, they come together, they sit down and say, like, never again we will allow that a person that is fleeing this violence and persecution, has no safe way to get out of this violence. So they signed the Refugee Convention, or the Geneva Convention, 1951. And since then, and for several years, people have been able to access protection all along the world, but also, of course, the United States. So it's both international and domestic law. The problem is that for the last few years, and it's relatively new, 2016, the US has tried to block people from accessing the right to asylum. Yes, asylum is an international, it's a human right. And but the first way that they started doing this in 2016 was with metering. What is metering? Basically, the US government saying like, okay, yes, you have the right to request permission to enter so that you can begin the asylum process, but we only have capacity to allow certain number of people to enter per day. So let's say in Nogales, they said, okay, 20 people is the number, the magic number that they come up with of people that CBP OFO in Nogales is able to process. So if you were person number 21, I'm sorry, you're out of luck. Come back tomorrow. So what started to happen is that, you had lines of people waiting on the Mexican side of the ports of entry, waiting in line, hoping to be next, saving their spot. And then the municipal authorities jump in and started creating like lists to keep order. And of course, Mexican authorities are known for being corruption free. And yes, of course not. So what ended up happening is that there were a lot of violations, a lot of complaints and lawsuits. So metering stopped. And at that time, they decided to create the Remain in Mexico program, or the Migrant Protection Protocols, or the protocols of the three lies, because they were not for migrants, they were not for their protections, and they were not really protocols. They were just like, unilateral decisions of forcing non-Mexican nationals to wait on the Mexican side for their next court hearing, and then know if they can continue the asylum process or not. So that was what the Remain in Mexico program was about. And then it continued for a little bit until they find the perfect excuse. In 2020, right when the pandemic of COVID-19 started, they decided to effectively block everyone from accessing asylum using the COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse. So basically, it didn't matter if you were in desperate need of protection, if you're fleeing violence and persecution, and you need to exercise your right to asylum. The U.S. said, like, we're not going to hold our international responsibility. We're not going to be, not even treat you with dignity and humanity. We're simply going to ignore you and block access to asylum. But it was not only 2020, but it was 2020, 2021, 2022. And it was until May of this year that Title 42 finally ended, and people were able again to approach the port of entry to exercise their right to asylum. And you would ask me, Pedro, so this means that as of today or as of May of 2023, people are now able to approach the port of entry and exercise their right to asylum? Yes and no, because a new policy blocking people from accessing asylum started, that is the so-called asylum ban or the transit ban. So this new policy that is blocking people from accessing asylum basically says that a person could be disqualified from asylum depending on how they enter the United States. So if they didn't use the CBP-1 app, or if they didn't seek to enter to be payrolled in through the special program for Cuban, Haitians, Nicaraguans, or Venezuelans, they could be disqualified. Or if they are entering the United States, but they didn't seek asylum or protection in Mexico or any other countries that they passed through before arriving to the US, that's why they call it the transit ban, then you will be disqualified for asylum. Okay? So that's where we are right now. This is, of course, trying to be fight against in the different courts, but it's still current and it's still happening. So I want to go further and explain what is the CBP-1 app. The CBP-1 app is an application that you have to download in your smartphone, and then you put all your information there and those of the people that are traveling with you, and you try every day to secure an appointment. So don't get me wrong, CBP-1 is not completely bad as long as it's not the only way for people to access asylum. So if it's a tool to facilitate people scheduling the day and time that they're going to present at the port of entry, it could be good. But if it's the only way that we want people to present themselves, that's where the problem is, because it generates a lot of inequities, starting with the fact that not all the asylum seekers have a cell phone, and those that have a cell phone do not necessarily have a smartphone, and those that have a smartphone might not know how to use it. I don't know if you can imagine, your parents or your grandparents being able to download an app and operate in it, and creating a profile, submitting all their information. And the other problem is that there are not enough CBP-1 appointments to respond to the demand of people that are trying to seek asylum. And only 8 ports of entry are participating. So it's not all along the border. So actually in Arizona, only the port of entry of Nogales it's operating CBP-1 app. And the other problem with it is that most of the appointments are allocated randomly. So it's kind of like winning the lottery. So we have people that have been stranded waiting for months and months, like over 5 months, over 6 months, trying to secure that appointment and still no success. And you have people that just arrive and they won the lottery, they get the appointment, and they present themselves. So it also generates frustration, desperation, and all these inequities that we've been discussing. The other situation with CBP-1 app is that in order to effectively request an appointment, you have to be above the 19 parallel north. So that red line that you're seeing there, so basically you have to be Mexico City or northern than that in order to be able to request an appointment through CBP-1 app for the geolocation. But this also means that not necessarily you have to be at the border in order to request an appointment. So we also mentioned that you have to either secure an appointment with CBP or use the special program for Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. So I want to explain a little bit about this program. So basically, it's again a good option, but only for a very limited number of people. And first of all, you're not able to request this program, this payroll process yourself. The way that it starts is that you have to have a US-based supporter, not necessarily a relative or a family member, as long as a person that is willing to file a form I-134A on your behalf before USCIS. So that's step one. Really, there's nothing that a person can do on their own until the US-based supporter is approved by USCIS. And on their end, they must possess an unexpired passport. That, it's kind of tricky because if you don't and you're fleeing from your government, it makes no sense that you will request an appointment for renewing your passport, or if you are already away from your home country, you won't go back or present at an embassy or consulate in order to get a passport. The other thing is that you have to pay for your own commercial flight. So that's also, another inequity. And you cannot be, you cannot have been deported from the United States for the last 5 years or so, or be subject to any inadmissibility bar. And last but not least, you cannot have crossed irregularly the borders of Panama, Mexico, or the United States. So if you cross one of those borders, you're out of the program. So if you're already in Mexico, learning from this program for the first time, you cannot apply for it because you have already crossed those other borders. And this happens a lot. I'm remembering Alberto, a young man from Venezuela, who was here during the fall and was explaining to me, like, Pedro, I didn't know about this program, but even if I knew, I couldn't have, stick around in order to wait for my family to apply before USCIS and then be approved and then fly. Because when I left Venezuela, I was miraculously able to get out of there alive. So if I were to stick around, the guerrilla would have get me. So that was not an option for me. And that's the problem. I mean, it might be a solution, but only for a few. But the reality is that most of the people that are fleeing violence and persecution, they cannot stick around for a few months and do this process because their lives depend on it. And lastly, they have to have taken, the protection in any of the countries that they pass through, or explain why they didn't. I want also to explain here that in order to be legally admitted to the United States, there are 3 requirements. Number 1 is the authorization. So the US government has to give you official permission to enter the country, okay? So when we talk about official permission, we're meaning a visa, and the CBP-1 app doesn't count as authorization. Why? Because the HS says so. That's pretty much why. The other thing, you need an official entry at a port of entry, and you need inspection before an immigration officer. So a person who is entering with a CBP1 appointment will be getting number 2 and number 3, but they're not getting number 1. A person who is entering remotely is not getting either 1, 2, or 3. And a person that is entering through the port of entry but we're on appointment, it's not getting number 1, but they're getting 2 or 3. But all of them, they are not being legally admitted to the United States. Why is that important? Because if you're not legally admitted to the United States, you're placed in removal proceedings. And I want to explain this a little bit more. So basically, a person that's arriving to Nogales today, they will have 3 options. Number 1, try to secure a CBP1 appointment that we have already discussed just how frustrating it can be, right? So if you enter with a CBP1 appointment, they will ask you, basic questions about the reason why you leave your country. And if you answer these questions correctly, you will be placed in removal proceedings. And if you enter this way, the detention is less likely. This means that you're going to have court hearings that you're going to show up to, but you're going to be released, and you're simply going to face the process in freedom. If you don't answer these questions correctly, it could lead to an order of removal, and that order of removal has a punishment of 5 years that you cannot reapply for readmission, and basically you are disqualified for asylum, and etc. But I mean, it's a little bit more complicated, a little bit harder to fail this one. So that's why it's the green way, right? Then in the middle, you have entering without a CBP1 appointment at the port of entry. So yes, the good thing is that a person can exercise their right to present before the immigration officer at the port of entry, and they will be asked, these basic questions. But in addition, because of the asylum ban, they're going to be asked, why didn't they seek asylum in any other country that they passed through? Why didn't they use the CBP1 app? Or if they're from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, why didn't they use the parole program? So if they're able to answer these questions correctly, they're going to be placed in removal proceedings. And if they don't, they're going to be removed from the United States with that punishment that they were discussing. Here, still, they can be released and face the process, in freedom. But what we are seeing is that if you are an adult individual with no children, then it's more likely than not that you're going to be detained. For example, a person that is crossing on their own, or a person that is traveling with a family that, for example, he's not legally married and he's not the biological father of the children. So it can seem like a family, but those scenarios, we are seeing that adult individual is placed in detention. Or the oldest of the siblings, the oldest kid of the family is older than 18, he could potentially be placed in detention too. So those are the situations that we are seeing. And the third one is if they enter without inspection through a remote area. So if that's the case, they're not only placed in removal proceeding, but expedited removal. And in detention is where they have usually their credible fear interview, and they have to pass these other questions, and they have to show the 5 requirements that we were discussing during that interview. And if they pass, then they are placed in regular removal proceedings. But if they don't, they're going to be order removal, and with the punishment that we were discussing. And here, the detention is way more likely than in the other 2 that we were discussing. Not necessarily because, they cannot detain everybody, but it is more likely. Here's the deal. Right now, the folks that are arriving to Nogales, and they have these 3 options, and we explained that the way that the US government wants you to seek access to asylum is through the CBP1 app. So they will try it. Most people say, what do I need to do? I want to do things right. But after 2 months, 3 months, 5 months of being stuck in Nogales and seeing that others are arriving and are able to secure an appointment and you haven't, and you're getting desperate, you feel frustrated, you're not safe there because, you were seeing that based on our numbers, most of the folks are from Mexico and they're trying to get away from Mexico. And the organized crime operates all along the border. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I won't say the word for it, but I understand. I mean, when they are sharing how desperate and frustrated they are, and it's overwhelming. And truly, we cannot expect people to simply continue to wait in this uncertainty. So that's when the option of entering without inspection becomes more and more attractive. And I mean, sometimes you have the organized crime present there, and they will convince people like, okay, you have already been waiting here for several months. I can get you there tomorrow if you pay me, $10,000, and I can get you there to the United States tomorrow. No need to wait. The other option, entering without an appointment, what has happened is that the municipal authorities from Mexico have created this this metering list all over again. So basically, people that are showing up to Nogales and they approach the port of entry, they will meet the Mexican municipal authorities and they will explain to them like, okay, yes, you do have the right to show up without an appointment, but since there are these several people waiting, we'll add you to the wait list and we will let you know once you're next. So that waiting time of showing up without an appointment, and this is, I mean, under US government, it's unofficial. Under the Mexican government, they consider the official wait list. But the current wait time for entering without an appointment is anywhere between 5 to 6 months because of all the people that are signing up out their names. And I mean, yes, most people are trying both. Like, at the same time that I'm trying to secure a CBP1 appointment, I'm trying to enter without an appointment. But I mean, yes, there are families that have been stuck here in Nogales for several months, and can we really blame them if they if they start to consider entering remotely after, I mean, they tried to go on the first route on the green way and then the orange way. I mean, and all they have left after a little bit, out of the desperation of not feeling safe, of not feeling that their children are safe. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. And of course, we as an organization, we that is locally rooted in Nogales, Sonora as well, we're trying to facilitate their integration into the community so that they can, I mean, access health, access education, access work, housing. Usually people, they don't stay in our shelter for a long time. They transition to a place that they can call their own. But still, it's very, very challenging. So before we finish, I have some next steps that you all can do. Number one is stay informed. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of news going on, but I will tell you to go to organizations like ours if you want to find out more about what's really happening, because surprise, media outlets tend to exaggerate how things are going here. And you can also buy and read Voices of the Border. This is a book that was written by Sister Engracia, the one that I show you in the first picture. And that QR code that you see there will take you to Georgetown Press, where you can order it, and all the profits go to Kino. Also, you can promote migrant integration in your community, promote welcoming migrants and facilitating their integration, find ways that you can, help them overcome the barriers that prevent them from integrating. You can contact your elected officials, your senators, your representatives, and ask them to, one, reallocate DHS funds to maximize access to asylum at ports of entry for both people with and without CBP1 appointments, instead of investing in detention and enforcement. You can ask them to allocate more funds to the shelter and service program that helps, all the NGOs that are doing what should be the government's work and strength humanitarian reception and welcome of migrants at the border. You can also ask them to support the Asylum Seeker Work Authorization Act to, again, facilitate their integration into the community. If they are already in the asylum process, that they should have access to an employment authorization document. increase congressional oversight on DHS through hearings, inquiries, and accountability reports. Of course, you can also, donate to Kino in kind, or financial donations are always welcome. There's a QR code if you want to go to our website where you can donate, or you can check the list of things that migrants that we are accompanying are needing. And you can also consider volunteering with us. I mean, hands are always needed. So for more information, that's the email address that you can contact, and just let us know what's your availability, and we work around your schedule. So thank you very much, and let's open it up for some questions or comments you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pedro. I appreciate that.
So if somebody has a question right now, you can either type it there at the chat, or you can also, we can probably open the camera if you want to, ask it directly. That's also an option. So just feel free to ask whatever question you might have regarding. I know it was a lot of information, and of course it's not an easy subject. That's why I also always said, this is tough to understand, tough to navigate, and to keep updated. So how are we expecting that a person who is arriving for the first time, fleeing for the life, is going to be able to get a hold of it, understand it, comprehend it, and assume the consequences of those decisions? So it's just challenging and overwhelming.
I was wondering, Pedro, if you could maybe share some of your personal background, how you came to be so committed to migrants and refugees.
Well, yes, that's a great question. I guess I've always, what really motivates me into law school was this feeling of fighting for justice, trying to find a trench where I can make a difference. And before I graduated, I find my cause in immigration. I was able to start working with migrant communities right away. It says in my bio that I have over 14 years of experience working with migrant communities. That's because I started at 19. So yeah, I'm a little younger than you might tell. But anyway, really, it has grown into me. And, I remember right after I graduated from law school that I had this opportunity to come to Arizona. Back then, all you can hear about, if you were interested in migration, was SB 1070, all the injustice, all the the difficult scenario that was happening towards migrants. So I said, if I'm serious about this, that's the place where I should be at, and that's why I arrived to Tucson over 10 years ago. And really, I feel right now that with Kino Border Initiative, I find the perfect spot for me to accompany people that are fleeing violence and persecution, and really sometimes ask me, how do you find hope, in this desperate scenario, accompanying people in this trauma, because migration is trauma, and that is true. But I also tell them that, I find hope in the same people that we're accompanying. It's their testimonies of faith, of strength, of resilience that really inspire me to keep doing what I'm doing, and really I feel like I get so much more from them that I'm really bringing to the table. So it's, I don't know, it has grown into me, and I really hope that one day there's not going to be a need for an organization like Kino, or for this kind of role that it's kind of like my dream is that there's no need for, kind of like I'm working to stay out of job, basically. So yeah, I mean, I love it. I'm passionate about it, but there shouldn't be a need for somebody advocating for human rights of people that are migrating. I can read Rhonda's question at the chat. It says, do you see a lot of individuals who serve time in prison in the US being deported, and any suggestions on how to best get them back to the US, or suggestions on how to fight the deportation altogether? That's a great question. We do see a lot of folks that, I mean, not necessarily spend a lot of time in jail, but have some time of problem, like, unpaid tickets, or they were detained for a misdemeanor, and at the time that they try to sort it out in court, there's a problem, because a lot of the times, these plea agreements that could get you out of doing some time in jail, they might have some immigration consequences. So I guess the best solution is to make sure that public defenders have also some training in migration, or making sure that migrants also speak to an immigration lawyer before signing any plea agreement, because a lot of these things, I mean, are preventable before they happen. But once they happen, because of all this, if you check our immigration law and all the inadmissibility bars, you'll see that, I mean, that's probably the more unjust of it all. So, and it's really, really difficult to overcome. And still, if you are facing removal proceedings after a criminal prosecution, getting legal assistance in time can help you prevent deportation. I mean, you might not qualify for adjustment status anymore, but there's the cancellation of removal that could potentially be an option. So I guess it's way, way easier when people are still in the US. So I will say, like, best case scenario is before the plea agreement. If not possible, then there's still something that can be done before carrying out the order of removal. And it's way too complicated once it has already been executed, once the person has already been deported to Mexico.
Well, thank you very much. We have 5 minutes of break left until the 4 o'clock session starts. I encourage all of our guests to reach out to Pedro or speak with him directly if getting involved in Kino or financially supporting them is something you're interested in. Thank you very much, Pedro De Velasco, for your time and insights.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here with us today.
We'll see you at the 4 o'clock session.